And like the first act ends with that sequence with Marlon and all that. I mean, he was the love of my life, but he was crazy.
Rita Moreno is one of Hollywood's most powerful performers. She achieved the rare EGOT status, winning Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Awards. But her success represents much more than just awards. She broke barriers in an industry that often pushed aside Latina actresses, born into a Hollywood system that didn't welcome performers like her. Moreno had to fight for every opportunity. She refused to accept the limited, stereotypical roles that studios wanted to give her. Throughout her 70-year career, she built a reputation for having high professional standards. Sometimes, this put her in conflict with some of the biggest names in the business. These conflicts weren't caused by bad behavior or being difficult to work with. Instead, they came from Moreno's strong principles against discrimination and unfair treatment. She stood up against the dismissive attitudes she faced from other performers who didn't respect her talent or dignity. These tensions show us the hidden struggles where artistic integrity clashed with Hollywood's deep-rooted prejudices. Her conflict with Marlon Brando, when Rita Moreno worked with Marlon Brando on the night of the following day in 1968, it should have been a meeting of two great talents. Instead, it became a nightmare that made Moreno question everything she thought she knew about professional respect. Brando was already famous for his method acting skills, but his behavior on set revealed a darker side that disgusted Moreno. The production fell apart as Brando showed what crew members called a complete disregard for everyone around him. He would show up hours late, mumble his lines so nobody could understand him, and purposely ruin scenes that didn't focus on his character. Moreno watched in horror as Brando bullied costume designers, ignored the director's instructions, and treated supporting actors like they were just props in his personal performance experiment. What really upset Moreno was how Brando manipulated younger cast members, using his star power to humiliate them during intimate scenes. A script supervisor named Margaret Booth later said that Rita would literally shake with anger watching Brando toy with these young actors' emotions. The method actor's cruelty went beyond professional boundaries, creating an atmosphere of psychological intimidation that Moreno couldn't stand. The breaking point came when Brando publicly made fun of Moreno's accent during a table read. He dismissed her suggestions about character motivation with contemptuous laughter. The director remembered Moreno's icy response. She told Brando that real artists don't need to put others down to feel powerful. This confrontation started a lifelong dislike that Moreno would later describe as watching genius corrupted by absolute selfishness. Years later, Moreno reflected on the experience with her typical directness. Brando had the talent of the gods, but the soul of a spoiled child, who never learned that other people have feelings too. Problems with Yul Brynner. Yul Brynner's commanding presence in The King and I made him a Broadway legend. But his behavior during the 1956 film version revealed an ego that Rita Moreno found absolutely insufferable. Their clash wasn't just about artistic differences. It was about basic respect for fellow performers. Brynner's approach to filmmaking resembled his royal character's authoritarian rule. He treated every scene as his personal kingdom where disagreement was not allowed. The tension began during rehearsals when Brynner tried to direct other actors' performances without consulting the actual director. Moreno, who was cast in a supporting role, watched his condescending treatment of Asian American performers with growing disgust. A choreographer later told Variety that Brynner acted like he owned everyone's performance, especially the women. Brynner's cultural insensitivity reached its peak during costume fittings when he made disparaging comments about authentic Asian dress, preferring Hollywood's romanticized versions. Moreno confronted him directly, pointing out the hypocrisy of a Russian-born actor dismissing cultural accuracy. His dismissive response was telling. The audience wants spectacle, not sociology. This crystallized everything she despised about Hollywood's colonial mentality. The final straw came when Brenner publicly criticized Moreno's interpretation of her character during a press conference, suggesting she lacked the sophistication for period drama. A costume designer recalled Moreno's withering comeback. Sophistication isn't about putting on airs, it's about respecting the craft and your colleagues. Moreno would later describe working with Brenner as watching someone confuse authority with artistry, dominance with talent. Betrayal by George Chakiris. The backstage reality of West Side Story contained a shocking betrayal that Rita Moreno never forgot. Her conflict with George Chakiris, the Greek-American actor portraying Bernardo, was particularly painful because both were fighting for authentic representation in an industry that routinely cast white actors in Latino roles. Instead of solidarity, Moreno discovered a competitor who seemed willing to undermine her for personal advancement. Chakiris allegedly developed what the choreographer described as a superiority complex during production. He constantly criticized Moreno's accent work and dance technique. His behavior became increasingly territorial, interrupting her rehearsals and offering unsolicited corrections to her performance choices. An assistant director recalled tensions so thick that you could cut them with a switchblade. The conflict intensified when Chakiris began lobbying for additional screen time, suggesting to producers that Moreno's Anita was too ethnic for mainstream audiences. This betrayal cut deeper than any studio executive's prejudice because it came from someone who understood the struggle for authentic representation. Moreno felt her fellow performer was perpetuating the very system that oppressed them both. Their animosity reached a crescendo during filming of America, where Chakiris's attempts to upstage Moreno became so obvious that the director had to intervene. A sound engineer later revealed that Moreno confronted Chakiris directly. She told him that selling out your own people for a better close-up was the lowest form of ambition. Moreno's final assessment was devastating. George taught me that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who looks like you, but thinks like them. The Natalie Wood situation. Rita Moreno's relationship with Natalie Wood during West Side Story embodied Hollywood's most troubling contradictions about representation and privilege. While Wood was undeniably talented and personally kind, her casting as Maria represented everything Moreno despised about the industry's casual racism. The conflict wasn't personal. It was philosophical, cultural, and ultimately heartbreaking for both women. Wood's genuine attempts to honor the Puerto Rican character through dialect coaching and cultural research only highlighted the absurdity of the situation. Moreno watched her colleague struggle with an accent that came naturally to her, creating an uncomfortable dynamic where the authentic performer coached the substituted star. A dialect coach noted the irony. Rita was teaching Natalie how to sound like what Rita actually was. The tension deepened when Wood, overwhelmed by the role's cultural weight, began seeking Moreno's approval for every performance choice. This well-intentioned dependence created a patronizing dynamic that Moreno found exhausting. She was simultaneously the authority on Puerto Rican authenticity and the supporting player to someone else's interpretation of her own culture. Wood's privilege became most apparent during publicity tours, where she was celebrated as a crossover star while Moreno was relegated to discussing ethnic authenticity. A producer later admitted that Natalie felt guilty about the whole situation. But that didn't change the fundamental injustice. Moreno's reflection captured the complexity. Natalie was a victim of the same system that victimized me. She still got to be Maria, while I got to be grateful for Anita. Ricardo Montalban's approach. Ricardo Montalban represented everything Rita Moreno fought against in Latino Hollywood. He was the safe, accommodating performer who never challenged the system's fundamental inequities. Their philosophical divide ran deeper than professional rivalry. It was a clash between revolution and assimilation that played out across decades of industry events and award ceremonies. Montalban's polished gentleman persona masked what Moreno saw as a dangerous acceptance of Hollywood's tokenism. The tension crystallized during negotiations for Moreno's guest appearance on Fantasy Island in the early 1980s. Montalban, as the show's star and producer, allegedly tried to minimize her role and reduce her fee, justifying it as maintaining the show's tone. A production assistant later revealed that Moreno's response was incendiary. She told him that being grateful for scraps wasn't the same as being successful. Their conflict represented competing visions for Latino representation in entertainment. Montalban believed in gradual acceptance through non-threatening performances, while Moreno demanded immediate recognition of full humanity and complexity. Industry insiders described their encounters at Hollywood gatherings as polite warfare, with each representing different strategies for survival in a hostile system. The breaking point came when Montalban publicly praised Hollywood's progress on diversity, while Moreno was simultaneously fighting discriminatory practices behind the scenes. A casting director recalled the aftermath. Rita felt betrayed by someone who should have been an ally, but chose to be a spokesperson for the status quo instead. Moreno's assessment was characteristically blunt. Ricardo chose to be Hollywood's favorite Latino instead of fighting to make sure we weren't their only Latino. Robert Redford's patronizing liberalism. Robert Redford topped Rita Moreno's list of despised colleagues, not through malicious intent, but through the most infuriating form of Hollywood liberalism, patronizing benevolence wrapped in golden boy charm. Their collaboration on a later career project revealed how even well-meaning allies could perpetuate the very systems they claimed to oppose. Redford's approach to social justice through cinema struck Moreno as performative activism that ultimately served his own image more than genuine progress. The conflict emerged during script development, when Redford consistently referred to Moreno as inspirational rather than engaging with her creative suggestions as an equal collaborator. His tendency to speak about minority experiences rather than listening to minority voices created an atmosphere of condescension that Moreno found unbearable. A script coordinator later noted that Rita would visibly bristle every time Bob called her a treasure instead of treating her like a peer. Redford's blind spot became most apparent when he suggested changes to dialogue that would make Moreno's character more sympathetic to mainstream audiences. His inability to understand that authenticity didn't require palatability revealed the limits of his progressive politics. The actor's genuine belief in his own enlightenment made challenging his assumptions nearly impossible. The final confrontation occurred when Redford publicly credited himself with discovering Moreno's dramatic range, ignoring her decades of acclaimed performances. A producer recalled her devastating response. She reminded him that she was winning awards before he was even acting, and inspiration isn't something you discover, it's something you recognize. Moreno's ultimate verdict crystallized her frustration with liberal Hollywood. Bob represented the worst kind of ally. One who wants credit for supporting you without ever actually following your lead. The larger picture. Rita Moreno's conflicts with these actors illuminate Hollywood's complex power dynamics and the price of maintaining artistic integrity. Her willingness to confront discrimination, even from celebrated colleagues, transformed her from performer to pioneer. These stories reveal the hidden battles fought by artists who refuse to compromise their principles in an industry built on compromise. Through her decades-long career, Moreno proved that talent and determination could overcome systemic barriers, but not without paying a personal cost. Her conflicts with fellow performers show us that the fight for equality and respect in Hollywood was often a lonely battle, fought one principled stand at a time.